Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel with me, Miss Lita. In this meeting, we are going to discuss about the new material in the second chapter, that is obligation. Here, I have 4 pictures. Before we talk about obligation in a specific, let's identify those pictures. Look at the picture and answer the question that follow. There are 4 questions here, and you must answer the 4 questions below. For the first, what are the people in the picture doing? The second one is, what shouldn't the person in its picture be doing? And the third is, what should the authorities do to prevent people from doing activities in its picture? And the fourth is, what should the person in its picture have known to avoid such conduct? Well, student, you must identify the 4 pictures on the screen and answer the 4 questions based on each picture. I want you to type your answer in my YouTube comment. After you finish, to listen and watch my explanation about obligation. Did you get it, student? I hope you can understand. In this session, we have learning objectives, such as, first, you are expected to be able to compare social function, text structure, and language features of expression of obligation. And the second learning objective is, you are expected to be able to make a statement about obligation in simple, continuous, and perfect. What is obligation? Obligation is a pressure on a person to do something or not to do something. The modal verbs of necessity show obligation in the past, present, or future. There are strong obligations such as rules and necessities, and weak obligations such as advice. So, students, there are 2 kinds of obligation in English, that is, strong obligation and a weak obligation, and each obligation must use the appropriate modal verb to show that the obligation is a strong or weak. To make you more understand about the strong obligation and weak obligation, let's turn to the next slide. Pay attention to the following table to differentiate the use of those modal verbs. In the tables, you can see that there are modal verbs of obligations, its function, and its example. In a common, the obligation can be expressed by using have to, had to, must, and should as the modal verb that indicate the sentence is obligation. Let's check one by one. Have to and had to. Have to and had to are used to express a strong obligation and indicate 100% obligation. Have to, the function is to express strong obligation. And had to, its function is to express strong obligation in the past. So student, if you want to express a strong obligation in the present or now, you can use have to as the modal verb. But if you want to express obligation in a strong obligation and the obligation function, it has been in the past, you can use had to. It means that the action has been done in the past. For example, you have to go exercise on Sunday. You have to go exercise on Sunday. The use modal verb have to in the example indicate that you express strong obligation and it indicates as the habit or obligation now or in the present. But if you use had to, for example, yesterday I had to get up early, but I couldn't. The use have to here means that you express obligation, but the action has been done in the past, and there is no related noun. And the second modal verb of the obligation is must. Must also indicate as the strong obligation and 100% obligation. The function of modal verb must is to express strong obligation based on the speaker opinion. Have to and must are used to express a strong obligation, but must here is based on the speaker opinion. For example, I must study harder. I give you other example of using must. I must wear uniform if I want to go to school. I must have breakfast in the morning. So, must here express the obligation. And if we do not do it, it means that we do not obey the rules. And the last modal verb of obligation is should. Should here can be used to express obligation, but it's only 50% obligation because should indicate the weak obligation. Should commonly used to express advice in English. And a should here can also use as an obligation expression, but its function is only to express mild or weak obligation or advice. For example, you should eat vegetables and fruits for your teeth, for your health. You should eat vegetables and fruits for your health. If we use modal should here, it means that that's an obligation, but it's more be an advice for someone. You can eat vegetables or fruits, or you cannot eat vegetables and fruit. It's up to you. So should here, its function is obligation or weak obligation and also an advice. After you understand the explanation about the table that indicate how to differentiate the modal verb used in obligation, let's turn to the social function of obligation. The social functions of obligation, the first is to tell oneself what is necessary or to remind someone. The second social function of obligation is to give strong advice or suggest someone. And the third is to warn someone or to talk about something that is not permitted. And the last is to obey the rule. So student, because we talk about obligation, it means that we express a sentence that warn that tells someone must do something or must not do something. And it's used to obey the rule. So, there are four social functions of obligation based on the modal verb that you use to express and its function. Not only have to, had to, must, and should that used to express obligation in English. There are some modal verbs that can be used to express obligation and necessity in English. The first, we have must, we have to, should, need to, be supposed to or had better, ought to, and have got to. If you use have got to, you express informal sentence. Must have to, like I explained before, must and have to indicate that the strong obligation. And a should indicate the weak obligation. Don't use must or must not or mustn't have for obligation and advice in the past. If you want to give or express obligation in the past, you can use had to, the past of had, have. Had to indicate that you express strong obligation in the past, but never use must or must not to express obligation in the past. You cannot use it. People may use had better, this one, to give advice. Had better is used to give strong advice, but it is not an obligation. Had better is only used when there is the threat or risk of danger if you do not follow the advice. So student, if you want to give strong advice, you can use had better. Had better indicate you give an information that something is a danger if you do not follow the advice. So had better, if we use had better, it means that advice, not an obligation. Be supposed to is used to talk about what you should do because of a rule or because it is expected. Be supposed to means that you talk about what you should do because of a rule or because it is expected. So if you use be supposed to, it indicates the obligation and you should do based on the rule. For example, you are supposed to have a driver license if you want to drive a car. That means that the role of a driver is the driver must or are supposed to have a driver license. The other example of using supposed to. You are supposed to wear uniform in the school. It means that the role of the school is the students are supposed to wear uniform. It's the rule. So if you use be supposed to, that you express obligation based on the rule. Here are some examples to make it clear. I will give you some examples to make it clear, student. For example, let's talk about the had better first. If I use model had better in my sentence, it means that I warn the risk or a dangers of something to the other. For example, you had better brush your teeth. If I use had better, it means that if you do not brush your teeth or if you don't, you may have teeth problem. Okay, so had better, its function is as a strong advice. And if I change had better in the model, use must, my sentence it could be, you must brush your teeth. If I use must in my sentence, it means that that is an obligation and it doesn't suggest a danger, but it's an obligation. And I never want to suggest a danger. So if I use had better, it indicates the sentence is a strong advice or advice. If I use must, it indicates the sentence is obligation. And if I change my model using should, for example, you should brush your teeth. This is just advice. It will be a good idea to brush your teeth. If I use should here, I just give an advice for other. But if you want to do or not, it's up to you. So should is only used to express our advice. But if someone want to do or not, it's up to them. But if I give an advice using had better, it means that someone must do it. Did you get it, student? I hope you can understand it. Next, the pattern is when you want to make a sentence that express obligation, the pattern is you put subject. Of course, you still remember what is subject. Subject are you, they, we, he, she, it, Lita, Anton, Dewi, and Sandra. That's called a subject. And then it's followed by modal verb. This is the modal verb that you can use to express obligation. You can choose one. And it must be followed by verb 1. For example, I must study, I have to study, I should study, I need to study, I'm supposed to study, I had better study, I ought to study, I have got to study. So after model here, some model here, it must be followed by infinitive or verb 1. This is the activity 1 that you must complete after you finish watching my explanation. There are 4 questions here. You choose the correct answer based on the statement. You can answer this question and you post the answer in the Google Classroom. You search or you open the Google Classroom Chapter 2 and you find the file name Activity 1 and you upload there. If you have any question related to the assignment, please don't hesitate to type me in the WhatsApp group. Well, class, continue to the second part. This is the end of my explanation in part 1. For the next explanation will be presented in the next meeting. And for today, I think it's enough. I remind you that the assignment must be completed. For the picture, I want you to directly comment in my YouTube channel. And the format I have typed in the description box. And for activity 1, you must upload or submit in the Google Classroom Chapter 2, Activity 1. Well, class, that is my explanation about obligation. Thank you, you have watched, and I hope you can understand and help you to be more understood about the use of obligation and how to express obligation in English. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.